The workflow at Rare Volume is very different per project, but if I were to explain high-level workflow, everything starts with a discovery phase. So a lot of the work that we do is kind of a new process, right? It's not as simple, or the foundations of broadcast design is very set. There's a process that you go through. Film production is very, very tight. But for a lot of interactive experience work, depending on, is it interactive touchscreen, is it an app, is it maybe just motion graphics but in a large scale, and depending on the client ask and the story that we have to tell, we need a discovery phase. So whenever we get into a contract with a new client, we make sure that we have enough time. Sometimes it's 1 week. Sometimes some of our projects for museums have 3-month discovery phases. And we take that time to really understand what the client needs, what the design solution should be, and also what the technical solution should be. Think of it as like a big brainstorm for 3 months or 1 week. And from there, once we have answered all of their big questions, we go into actual production. And again, it's tricky because sometimes that's a full CG production with only Octane, right? C40. Sometimes it's character animation with 2D elements and typography. Sometimes it's mostly code. So it's hard for me to pinpoint the exact process. But one thing that is very similar is in production, in motion graphics, it usually starts with storyboards or wireframes, and then detailed style frames, and then animation production, right? We usually have one more step after that, which is code, right? Because a lot of our work incorporates real-time elements. The place where code comes into our workflow, it slightly differs per project. For example, we're doing one project now where in a big lobby space, there's a big installation wall. And whenever someone walks up the stairs, a beautiful Houdini simulation goes upwards. Whenever someone walks down, it comes downwards. And then when you go in front of this and wave, the ink droplets move around, right? So the way that we executed that project was we combined pre-rendered Houdini simulations with real-time particles that are over the simulations. What that means is you can't just design everything in style frames and then give it to the coder. It's a very integrated process. So as I was creating style frames of the ink drops, the coder next to me was like, I can't do that, or yes, we can do that. So it's like, okay, if you can't do that, can you do this? So it's very collaborative and a very integrated process. Sometimes this other project that we're doing is a big interactive wall where you could control different characters, right? And these are all animated characters, very illustrative. For that, the coding side is really easy, actually. All they're doing is building a media player. What that means is when I select this character, the computer says, play MP4 1, 2, 3. It just tells you what character to play, right? So there's different types of interactivity, and depending on what type of project it is, they could come in earlier on in the phase, or sometimes at the end. Yeah. The style frame process, creating designs for pitch, we try to be very respectful of design at Rare Volume. What that means is, when I was a younger designer, one of my mentors, he's from Stardust, and they were famous for turning around like 20, 30 style frames a day, right? So when I was a junior designer, that was my style, where it's like, give me that, and by the end of the day, I had 3 different styles and 10 different style frames each, right? And I was like, wow, that's awesome. That type of daily working builds like a muscle in you to be able to execute, but it's very hard to make meaningful design that way, right? And especially now that motion design is going more into interactive design, a lot of the work that you create has to be functional. What that means is it has to make sense, right? There's no room for fancy transitions to hide bad design. So, and also as a designer, as I mature, I realize that time of my life where I was just creating 30 frames a day, I needed that. But now, in the process at Royale, we try to protect design. So, what does that mean? If a client comes in and says, I want amazing 3D particles in real time for next week's pitch, we simply say, let's sit down and have a conversation. What do you really need, right? So usually when clients ask for style frames, what they're saying is, I need to understand what this is going to be like. But most designers don't understand there's other ways to achieve that than just creating a style frame, rushed, right? So when an ask like that comes in, what we usually respond with is, hey, let's have a few working sessions where we share very detailed mood boards and references. And then after hours and hours of talking about it, we can start to create a look and feel that tells this story or responds to your client ask. And by the end of it, what you're going to have is a few detailed style frames and a lot of descriptions of what this is going to be like, and maybe some sketches, and maybe one hero style frame, right? Once you have a lot of conversations and brainstorming with the client, sharing references, write-ups, and look at this clip, look at this design, by the end of it, you don't need 10 style frames to be signed off. You just need one really good one that reflects all the thinking that's been done. And I feel like that's a more smarter design process than just throwing out random style frames and hoping it sticks. So when a more collaborative working environment with the client is not allowed, honestly, a lot of times we're not afraid to say no to a project, right? So if we know that we get a client ask and we're not going to be able to respectfully and properly execute the ask, then sometimes we have to deny the project. And we've found that surprisingly, a lot of people are afraid that if I say no to this client, they're going to get pissed off and never come back. No, they actually respect that. Right? As long as we're honest and we say, hey, because we respect your process, we're going to say no to this because this timeline doesn't make sense. And most of our clients come back with another project, or they make more time for us.